Hey everybody, today's movie review I'm talking about the film Beau is Afraid. This is a new A24 independent film that was released nationwide not too long ago. Unfortunately, it's not doing too great in the box office, so I don't know how much longer this film is going to be in theaters. But this film is by director Ari Aster, who I haven't really been keeping up with, unfortunately, lately. I know he directed the film Hereditary and Midsummer, so I know this is kind of one of my first exposures to one of his movies. But in this movie, though, you guys, there's a character named Beau that we follow because the title is Beau is Afraid. And he is somebody that suffers from really bad anxiety disorder. He lives in like a really bad neighborhood. He has an over controlling mother. It's never really quite clear what kind of job he has or anything, but he lives in a really bad apartment in a really bad area. And we find out early on that he's about to embark on a really long trip to go see his mother since she supposedly lives really far away, and a lot of problems happen. He loses his keys to his apartment. There's an incident involving a doctor who's basically keeping him hostage till he gets better. There is a incident where he basically out of nowhere gets invited to this play that takes place in the forest. All this stuff happens, and even more stuff beyond the stuff I just mentioned happened to him. A bunch of stuff happened to him on his journey to go see his mother, and it's just one thing after the other. It's just one delay after the other. There's even news he gets that I can't spoil here about his mother that um, really more urgently makes him want to go see his mother even sooner. And so over the course of this movie, we try to find out, because he does take anxiety, he does see a therapist early on in the movie. Is this something that's like a bad side effect that he's having over the course of this movie based on his medicine? Because there's even strict directions on his medicine container as far as how to take that. And once he doesn't take it the right way based on a series of events that also happened to him for why he couldn't take it with water. And so over the course of this movie, we try to find out, is it the medication that's doing all this to him, the misuse of that? Is it really all the stuff he's been having over the course of the years with his over controlling mother that makes him the way he is, that makes him view life as dark as it is? And so over the course of this movie, we find out what exactly, is going on with Beau. Why is his anxiety as bad as it is? Why is his mother as controlling as she is? The medication he's taking, does that have something to do with all this crazy, bizarre stuff we're seeing over the course of this movie? So that happens over the course of Beau is Afraid. So overall, guys, I was not a big fan of this movie, and that's kind of common that I'm seeing with this movie. Is there's people who absolutely love Beau is Afraid, and there's people that absolutely do not like Beau is Afraid. I'm unfortunately a part of the people that did not like Beau is Afraid, so I'm going to go over some positives and negatives here in a minute. Is some things about it that I admire that are good about it, but for the most part, why it didn't work for me, and why I think it's not going to work for a lot of mainstream audiences either. So for my positives and negatives of this movie, this is a very visually unique movie. It's very different. I would even say when the film gets to the part where he's invited to this play in the forest, the film does look very unique. It does look kind of like something out of a picture book, out of a children's play you go see in an elementary school somewhere. When that part of the film goes in the play and we kind of see Beau embark on like a little mini journey while he's watching this play, very unique, very different. Definitely feels like something you'd see out of like a dream that you would have it late at night. So then there's other aspects outside of that scene that are interesting. Like the film has a lot of very like heavy yellows, heavy reds. There's even a scene where like Beau's mother is talking to him as a young boy, and the only lighting in the room is this little like light lamp that spins around and stuff. I think it's even featured in the trailers. So there's unique stuff like that to Ari Aster that makes his visual aesthetic of his movies look very interesting and unique. Not quite enough to save the movie, as we're going to get into the negatives here in a little bit, but very visually unique, very visually different. I admired that part of this movie. I think the film also, for the most part, it does have a successful character study on anxiety, because there is a lot of stuff throughout this movie that Beau suffers from that everyday people probably wouldn't suffer from as badly. Yes, if you live in a bad neighborhood, obviously that's going to terrify you. If you're, having affordable rent and all that other stuff is very important to you. So the film does, I think, successfully for the most part, have a very successful character study look on anxiety because there is a lot of scenes where um, Beau's afraid to leave something behind, or he's afraid to start the bathtub, things like that. So there's a lot of things about this movie that it would escalates someone who might not have this disability, and for Beau, it definitely escalates that fear and that the way of approaching certain things in life. So I think for the most part, on that level, the film succeeds on being a successful character study on anxiety. And for the most part, you do feel sorry for this Beau character. He's just encountering one thing after the other. I mean, the guy can't cut a break. You really do feel sorry for him, especially when you get to learn about the mom and about all the other stuff that's been going on in his life. You do feel sorry for the guy. The guy just can't have a moment to himself to breathe and to be happy and to not have to worry about his anxiety. So for the most part, as far as Ari Aster making me feel sorry for the Beau character that's played by Joaquin Phoenix, I think on that level, once again, the film succeeds. And throughout this movie, I always felt hungry for more information. And so for this movie is 3 hours long, so I think that's another reason why this film might scare away mainstream audiences is because it is such a long runtime. It is 3 hours. But for the most part, throughout this runtime, I was always hungry for information. I was always hungry for finding out more about Beau's life and about his mom and about his family and about the way that he is and how there's this, this young girl that was a part of his life at one point. We get to experience all the stuff that was going on with her over the course of this movie. And so you always felt hungry for information. You always were interested in learning about more about what was going on. So as far as that being goes, as far as that element goes, as far as me feeling invested in everything, I think the film succeeds on that level. And then for the most part, this film does make you appreciate doctors. There's a character played by Nathan Lane here who's a doctor who does a lot of things that are very unorthodox that I probably wouldn't have recommended or would advise other doctors to do. But for the most part, he does help Beau kind of get back on track. And there's something really horrific that happens to Beau before he meets this doctor. And so you really do kind of appreciate what doctors can do for you and how they can get you back on your feet so quickly on certain things, especially with this emergency that Beau runs into over the course of the movie. So I thought on that level it also works for this movie too. But for my negatives of Beau is Afraid, unfortunately it just does not come together in any way. For all the times you think you know where it's going to go, for all the times where you think the film is starting to make sense or has answers for you, it goes in a completely different direction again, and it completely derails any kind of expectations or feelings or possible connections you might have had leading up to that moment. So there's just always that one thing that always keeps happening over the course of this movie. And like I said, it never comes together. There's for all those directions that you really think the film is starting to come together and come to fruition the way that it should. Unfortunately, it just goes into a different direction again, and it just doesn't come together the way it does. I know that Ari Aster was, I'm sure, trying to have that effect of feeling like a dream where everything doesn't connect and it's just kind of things happening all at once and that they don't connect. But for me personally, I would have preferred a story where things came together more and I felt more rewarded for going on this journey and finally getting some answers that I finally needed to feel the way I did for this movie. And for the most part, we're given a lot of really inconsistent, inaccurate information over the course of this movie. So as a result, everything kind of feels like a mess. I mean, there's scenes where, like I said, leading on early on in the movie, we find out that Beau is going on this plane ride to go see his mom because she apparently lives so far away. But when Beau is kind of forced into this terrible thing, he kind of gets to his mom's place in like maybe 2 days through both a car and through walking. So it doesn't. There's just a lot of scenes where, for all this buildup of, oh, she lives so far away, the only way I can get there is by plane. There's other scenes that suggest that he really can get there pretty quickly, and so there's other scenes that I can't even spoil here where we learn even more about the mom and about other things, and she seems much closer to where he lives than we all think. And so there's other information like that where it's just, okay, now that I know this, all the stuff from over here doesn't make any sense anymore. And so there's a lot of scenes where it's very inconsistent and inaccurate, so it's very hard to get attached to anything because I know by like the next act or the next scene, the film's going to go into a completely different direction, and so it's hard to connect anything. Another negative I have with the movie is there's just tons of unlikable characters in this movie. Besides Beau and besides the Nathan Lane doctor, almost all the characters in this film have something weird and off-putting and dark and negative about them. And so it's just one of those films where I almost kind of didn't want to get to know other characters because I know there would be something weird about them. And it's just really unlikable characters. And so for being a 3-hour runtime, we're really asked to be spent with a lot of time with a lot of characters that, to be honest, I just didn't care about by the end of the movie. And the film also just can't make up its mind of, is this something that Beau is experiencing through his medication because the film builds up on that so much early on in the movie? Or is this just a reality where Beau views everything so dark and scary because of his anxiety? And there's just so many times in this movie where I think the film has decided to do one route or the other, because by the time the film ends and by the time we're given so much information in different directions, the film never decides if it is the medication route or if it is the dark view of reality route. Because if you go one way or the other, everything over here has to make sense and everything over here has to make sense, because no route is taken and it goes right down the middle. Neither side that came to either conclusion has any sense anymore, because there's certain things over here that are trying to be satisfied while there's things over here trying to be satisfied, and as a result it goes down the middle and no side gets satisfaction at all. So by the time the film ends, neither side is happy, because either conclusion you were trying to come to doesn't have enough information on either side for anybody to feel satisfied with. And like I said, this is a very long run time for a movie. Easily trim out 45 minutes of this movie. I think anything longer than 2 hours and 15 minutes is asking for way too much of this movie. I really wish a producer or somebody who worked for A24 could have stepped in, told Ari Aster that this film needs to be shorter. It needs to be shorter. There's just so much information and different routes and different directions the film takes that 3 hours is just way too much for this movie. It's too much for the audience. It's too much for the film. There's that really just further encourages me and whoever might have edited this movie that some scenes need to be trimmed out here, because there's just so much scenes here that do not need to be here in this movie. And for the most part, and I know this is open for interpretation, but for me personally, this film was just too weird. This film was just not. I get that Ari Aster is, he's made two films that people seem to like that, made money and so on and so forth. But, you're given $35 million. You need to make a film. Yes, you can make whatever you want as far as a story goes, as far as what you really want to get down on paper, if you really have a message to say about anxiety. But I think this is further proof that with $35 million, you need to have a producer every once in a while come and see in your work, come in and see what exactly you've been working on. And if it seems like something that audience are just not going to connect with, they have every right to tell you, hey, you're borrowing our money for $35 million. You need to make more sense out of this. So whether you need an editor, whether you need a rewrite, whether you need to reshoot some stuff, something needs to happen here where more sense needs to happen, because this is just too incoherent for us to release. Therefore, changes need to happen. So if Ari Aster does indeed get more money for another movie, I hope a producer can stand in every once in a while and be like, things need to change here, because everything you've just presented to us is incoherent and it's not going to be releasable. Well, I'm going to give Beau is Afraid a 6 out of 10. There's things about it that are admirable, but for the most part, the film does not come together. Too much inaccurate information is thrown at us over the course of this movie. There's too many unlikable characters. The pill delusion / dark view of reality, you have to choose one or the other, because if you go one way or the other or neither, that's not going to satisfy your audience. The runtime for this was way too long, and to be honest, this film is just a little too weird for its own good. So 6 out of 10 for me. I'm not going to recommend Beau is Afraid. I think there's too many problems with it. If you're an A24 person, if you're an Ari Aster person up to this point, maybe you'll find something you'll enjoy out of it. I personally did not. Keep in mind, I did not see Hereditary or Midsummer, so I don't really have anything to base that off of. But as far as this one time of this one film I've seen him do so far, I don't think dark comedy is for him. So 6 out of 10 for me. I do not recommend Beau is Afraid.